And it was, again, just over 2 years ago now that the FBI itself received information that an advisor to the Trump campaign had bragged to a foreign diplomat that the Russian government had hacked Democratic Party emails. And that boast to that foreign diplomat happened long before there was actually any public information circulating about the Russian government hacking Democratic emails. So the FBI realized there was something to go with there. The CIA had been advised by Allied intelligence services that there was something else to go on that seemed related. So it's just over 2 years ago, this counterintelligence investigation begins. Are the Russians actually running an intelligence operation to try to influence the choice of the next American president? If so, is that candidate in on it? And that investigation started just over 2 years ago. Since then, of course, the candidate in question has been elected president. And under him, since he has been president, the director of the FBI leading the investigation has been fired, turned into a political punching bag, and removed from office. His top deputy, the number 2 official at the FBI, running the day-to-day operations of the FBI and the investigation, he too has been fired, turned into a political punching bag, and removed from office. Now, the head of the counterintelligence division at the FBI, the lead agent on that investigation, now today he has also been fired, turned into a political punching bag, and removed from office. The president has also threatened all 3 of them with being prosecuted themselves. Director, deputy director, head of the counterintelligence division, all gone, all blown up career-wise, right? All being threatened with being prosecuted themselves. And the Russia investigation continues to unspool, right? We've had the national security advisor plead guilty and become a cooperating witness. We've had the president's deputy campaign chair plead guilty and become a cooperating witness. We've had that Trump foreign policy advisor who piqued the interest of the FBI with his inside info about the Russian hacking operations, right? We've had him plead guilty too and become a cooperating witness. We'll actually have a little more on him coming up tonight. There's been some movement in his case. We've got another Trump foreign policy advisor formally named as an agent of the Russian government in multiple foreign intelligence surveillance wiretap applications. We've got the ongoing felony trial against the president's campaign chair. We've got pending felony criminal indictments against multiple alleged Russian agents and Russian military intelligence officers. We've got pitched legal battles now over the potential legal liability for other people associated with the president and for potentially testimony about them. People like Roger Stone and Michael Cohen, the president's longtime attorney. But one by one, even as all of that fruit has been born from this organization, from this investigation, one by one, the law enforcement and counterintelligence leadership actually in charge of the investigation that has led to all of this thus far, one by one, they have been peeling them off and destroying them in their careers. The director, James Comey, the deputy director, Andy McCabe, with Peter Strzok's firing today, that adds the head of the FBI's counterintelligence division to the list. And I think there's a couple different important consequences of that. And the first one is, frankly, about the president's personal legal liability in this scandal. Last June, after he was fired, FBI Director James Comey testified to Congress that President Trump had improperly pressured him about the FBI's open investigation into Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. Now, at the time, Comey said he recognized the president's request to him concerning Flynn to be both improper and highly unusual. And so, according to his FBI training, he knew what to do next. He immediately wrote down what had happened in that conversation with the president. He wrote it up in memo form. He wrote it right after that conversation. He then shared the contents of the memo with senior FBI officials. So essentially, they could corroborate what he had said at the time about the interaction that he had just had.
Who did you talk with about that, lifting the cloud, stopping the investigation back at the FBI, and what was their response?
Well, the FBI, during one of the 2 conversations, I'm not remembering exactly, I think the first, my chief of staff was actually sitting in front of me and heard my end of the conversation because the president's call was a surprise. And I discussed the lifting the cloud and the request with the senior leadership team, who typically, and I think in all these circumstances, was the deputy director, my chief of staff, the general counsel, the deputy director's chief counsel, and I think in a number of circumstances, the number 3 in the FBI, and a few of the conversations included the head of the National Security Branch. So that group of us that lead the FBI when it comes to national security.
Who else could back me up on what happened there, right? And he gives this big list: the deputy director, the chief of staff, general counsel, deputy directors, chief counsel, head of the National Security Branch, the FBI's number 3 official, that would be the associate deputy director of the FBI. Right, if you don't speak the language of job titles in the FBI, it just seems like a lot of similar sounding adjectives, right? It seems like kind of a long and hard to remember list. But those are very specific people, and Comey knows who he told. And he was very clear about this. When questioned about it repeatedly, he was very clear. Here's who I told. Here's who my corroborating witnesses are.
Who are those senior leaders at the FBI that you shared these conversations with?
As I said in response to Senator Feinstein's question, deputy director, my chief of staff, general counsel, the deputy director's chief counsel, and then more often than not, the number 3 person at the FBI, who's the associate deputy director, and then quite often the head of the National Security Branch.
So to us, again, it just seems like a list of a lot of job titles that don't sound all that distinct, but when you compare what he said about it, it's consistent. This is who he told. He knows exactly who it was, right? In Comey's telling, the president tried to interfere with the FBI investigation of National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. The president denies he did any such thing. But Comey has backup, right? Comey, with his FBI training, committed the president's exact words, he says, to writing right after that conversation happened. And then he told all these people, crucially, at the time, so they can corroborate what Comey said at the time about what happened, right? And these are not just job titles. There are specific people who had these jobs at the time in question, right? Comey and the corroborating witnesses for Comey and his account of what the president did. Well, it's taken them a little while to get all the way through this list, but the only one still there is David Bowditch, the one at the bottom there. He had been the number 3 official at the FBI, had been the associate deputy director. Now he has moved up to be number 2, not number 3 at the FBI. David Bowditch is apparently the one who personally directed today that counterintelligence chief Peter Strzok be fired, even though the FBI's Office of Personnel Management had decided that Strzok should be kept on. Bowditch, the FBI deputy director now, he's the only one left of all of the corroborating witnesses for James Comey's testimony. James Comey's testimony that the president leaned on him to shut down an open FBI investigation into the National Security Advisor. And with all of them, almost all of them, all picked off now, right? Who's going to back up James Comey?